Behaviorism. In the past, no learning theory specific to language learning existed. General theories on learning were applied to language learning. So there was no specific theory about how language is acquired, but there were general theories about learning, and these general theories about learning were applied to language learning. Now, one such general theory was behaviorism, popularized by B.F. Skinner, and behaviorism was applied to language learning. The general theory of behaviorism, believing in imitation practice, was applied to language learning. And language is a set of habits according to behaviorism. That's very important. That's the most important thing to remember about behaviorism. Language is a set of habits according to behaviorism. Now, before B.F. Skinner, it was Ivan Pavlov who proposed classic behaviorism. So Ivan Pavlov was a predecessor of B.F. Skinner in classic behaviorism. And this is what classic behaviorism looks like. This is what classic conditioning looks like. It's based on stimulus response. So when there's no conditioning, before conditioning, there's food and the dog salivates. That's an unconditioned response. But if every time you provide food, you tune your fork, then I mean, if you tune the fork and then the dog hears it, there's no conditioned response. There's no salivation because the dog has not yet associated the tuning fork with food. But if you provide food and at the same time you sound your tuning fork, eventually at the start there's no salivation. But eventually after conditioning, when you tune your fork, when you sound your tuning fork, the dog salivates because the sound of the tuning fork has become associated with food. So it's all about association. So the tuning fork is associated with food. And so that's conditioning, classic conditioning by Pavlov. Now, according to behaviorism, habits habits are associated responses to stimuli, but not just associated, they're regularly associated. Again, again, habits are responses that are regularly associated to stimuli. They're not just responses, but regularly associated responses to stimuli. Okay, now the regularly associated responses are a result of a repeated stimulus response cycle. So when you repeat the stimulus response again and again and again, that will produce what is called regularly associated responses. Okay, so habits are regularly associated responses to stimuli, and habits are the result of repeated response cycles. Habits are the result of repeated stimulus response cycles. And habits are observable. It's habits we are concerned with in behaviorism. We're not concerned with internal mental processes. Okay, what happened inside the brain? That's not the concern of behaviorism. That's not the concern of habits. And habits, class, are automatic. They're difficult to change. That's true in walking, in driving. I wonder if any of you ever woke up and started to prepare for school until you realized it's Saturday or Wednesday. Okay? How many of you started to wake up and prepare for school until you realized it's Wednesday or Saturday? Okay? So habits are automatic, they're difficult to change. So there are a few of you who were like that, who it happened to you. Okay? Now, in 1957, B.F. Skinner published Verbal Behavior, and it was a hit. Now, Skinner emphasized what's called operant conditioning. Operant conditioning downplays the stimulus because we don't really know which stimulus prompted a particular response. So for B.F. Skinner, it's not really the stimulus that's important. It's not the stimulus that's important. What is important is the behavior after the response. Again, it's not the stimulus that's important, but the behavior or consequence after the response is what reinforces the habit. So for Skinner, reinforcement is more powerful than association. So for Ivan Pavlov, association is important, but for Skinner, there's something much more powerful. It's something that achieves more than association, and that is what is called reinforcement. According to B.F. Skinner, operants are kinds of responses to stimuli that produce and therefore are governed by the consequences they produce. Examples include sitting, walking, dribbling a ball. Okay? Those are what we call operants. Then we also have respondents. Respondents are elicited by identifiable stimuli, like reflex actions, like laughing. Okay, so I think you already learned this somewhere. Okay, behaviorism by B.F. Skinner and operant conditioning. You've probably learned this in one of your Prof Ed courses or in one of your courses in PNU. Now, highlighted in Skinner's operant conditioning is the concept of imitation. A language learner imitates other people. A child learning his or her first language imitates other people. And an adult learning a second language imitates other people. Class, this is most important in pronunciation. Imitation is most obvious and most important in pronunciation. In fact, class, Skinner's behaviorism has been largely debunked except in the realm of pronunciation. Okay, so Skinner's operant conditioning Skinner's behaviorism has been debunked. It's no longer true. Many experts don't agree with it anymore, except in the realm of pronunciation. And in Skinner's behaviorism, imitation is a highlight. Imitation is an important feature. Language learners imitate other speakers. Also, another highlight in Skinner's behaviorism is reinforcement. So reinforcement and imitation, they are key to operant conditioning. Okay? Reinforcement in the form of feedback is very important. Reinforcement of a behavior of an utterance is important in the form of feedback. Okay, according to Skinner's operant conditioning, no negative feedback or no negative reinforcement should be given without positively reinforcing alternate behavior. You don't just punish, you provide, you reinforce alternate behavior. So no punishment should be given without positively reinforcing alternate behavior. Punishment is actually negative feedback or negative reinforcement, and that should not be done without positively reinforcing alternate behavior. Now, what about imitation in the case of children? Well, children imitate utterances. Children imitate utterances. That's in first language learning. I'm sure you've seen that with your nephews and nieces. So, children are rewarded or corrected in their speech. They say something, and based on what they say, it's reinforced or not. So, for example, Johnny has no Coke, and then his behavior is he asks for Coke. Can I have some Coke, please? And then after that, Johnny has Coke. Johnny realizes that he needs to add please, because if he doesn't say please, he doesn't get what he wants. Class, that's something that happened, something similar happened to my niece. My niece realized that by saying bad words, she will attract the attention of adults immediately. So my niece would ask for something, she would say something, request for something, the adults don't pay attention. So what would she do? She would immediately say something, a bad word. She would say a bad word, and immediately the adults pay attention. So she realized that is true. That is the way to do it. And so I told her, the adults around her, when she says a negative word, when she utters a negative word, don't pay attention. Don't pay attention. Even if you try to correct her, you're actually reinforcing her behavior because she realizes that adults pay attention when she says a bad word. Okay? So, children are rewarded or corrected in their speech in the form of responses from adults. Now, that was first language learning. We also have second language learning. Second language learning proceeds the same way. Second language learners imitate utterances, and second language learners also get rewarded or corrected based on what they say. And based on the reinforcement, whether positive or negative, language learners develop their language learning. They develop their language based on whether they were rewarded or corrected. So according to behavior to B.F. Skinner, language learning is most successful when language tasks are broken down into individual stimulus response links, which could be practiced and mastered. So according to B.F. Skinner again, how do you make language learning successful? Well, break down the language task into stimulus response links, which could be practiced and mastered. So the language tasks should be broken down into individual stimulus response links. So uh, you say something, the language learner says something, and you reinforce it. Okay, so like in the word please. Okay, like in the word please. So when they use please, they get rewarded. When they don't say please, they don't get what they want. So stimulus response. and the response is provided with reinforcement. Okay? Now, an important characteristic of a theory in language learning is that language learning's view about errors. A theory's view of errors is very important. So, how does behaviorism see errors? Well, according to behaviorism, errors in speaking are caused by first language interference. So, errors are caused by the old habits of the language programmed into your minds. The language programmed into your mind, those are old habits, they interfere with learning the new language because the new language is a set of new habits. So the set of old habits from your old language, from your first language, they interfere with learning the new language, new habits. Again, class, this is largely debunked. This idea is largely debunked except in the realm of pronunciation. Now, the idea that errors are caused by first language interference is called proactive inhibition. Proactive inhibition. So, according to behaviorism, first language interference produces errors. When your first language habits interfere with the new habits of your new language, that produces errors. And my classic example class is a tennis player learning badminton. You see, class, in the United States and Europe, badminton is not very popular. What is popular there is tennis. So Europeans and Americans, they play tennis. And class, in playing tennis, you rely on your arm, on the strength of your arm. Okay? The strength of your arm. So many Americans, many Europeans, they learn tennis and they learn to use their arm, the strength of their arm. But class, in badminton, it's not the strength of your arm that's important. It's your wrist that's important. It's your wrist that's important, not your arm. But then when many Americans play badminton, they rely on the strength of their arm to play badminton instead of relying on the strength of their wrists. Why? Because that's what they've been used to. The old habits of tennis interfere with the new habits of badminton for Americans. So that's interference. And that's the same thing with language according to behaviorism, especially in the case of pronunciation. The pronunciation in your old language, in your first language, interferes with the way you pronounce the new words in the new language. Okay? So according to behaviorism, the habits you previously learned prevents you from learning new habits. And the language programmed into your mind, the old habits of your first language, interfere with learning the new habits of the new language. That is what is called the result. That's the result of what is called proactive inhibition. Here's an illustration of proactive inhibition. You have meaning in your brain. Instead of expressing it using the structures of the second language, you express it using the structure of the first language. Again, you have meaning in your brain. Instead of expressing it through the structure or habits of the second language, you express it using the structure and habits of your first language. So, for example, if you are French, you have fraud. Okay, fraud or something like that maybe. Now, that's what you have in your brain, and you express it using the habits and structure of the old language. You say, I have cold. In, giniginaw ka. Okay, you're cold, meaning you feel cold. So instead of saying, I am cold, the Frenchman would say, I have cold. Again, the Frenchman, because Geoffroid means I have cold. Instead of saying I am cold, expressing his meaning in the structure and habit of the second language, he uses the structure and habit of the first language. So he says, I have cold, which is wrong in English. So that's wrong in English. On the other hand, Germans say, Ich bin kalt, I am cold. Now, the structure of German is similar to the structure of English, so there's no proactive inhibition. There's no interference from the first language. Why? Because they have similar structures. They have similar habits. How about Filipino? Giniginaw ako. Instead of saying I am cold, many language learners would say cold me. Cold me. Instead of expressing it, the idea in the structure of English, you still follow the structure of Filipino, even though you use English words already. That's proactive inhibition. So, transfer of habits will take place from the first language to the second language. Transfer of habits will take place from the first language to the second language. Where the first language is different from the second language, errors will result. Where the first language is similar to the second language, easy and rapid learning will result. Again, where the first in areas of the language where the first language is similar to the is different from the second language, errors will result. But in areas where the first language are similar to the second language, then there's easy and rapid learning. So in areas where the first language and second language are similar, easy and rapid learning will result. So according to behaviorism, errors are undesirable. They must be avoided. Okay? They are evidence of non-learning, not wrong learning. You didn't really learn it. And if errors are not corrected immediately, they might become habits. Okay? So just like in any other sport, in other activity, if what you do is not corrected, they become habits. So for example, you play the guitar and you move your elbow when you strum your guitar, that becomes a habit if it's not corrected. So you should not move your elbow when you play the guitar. And when your trainer sees that, he or she corrects that immediately. Otherwise, if she doesn't correct that immediately, you will go on moving your elbow when you play the guitar. Okay? So errors are undesirable, they must be avoided. They are evidence of non-learning, not wrong learning, and errors might become habits if uncorrected. Now, we need to identify where there are potential areas of error so that we can easily we can be ready. And how do we predict that? How do we predict the areas of potential error? That is the concern of contrastive analysis hypothesis. Contrastive analysis hypothesis is predictive. It tries to predict where a language learner will commit errors based on the differences between the first and second language. Okay? Now, there is what is called audio-lingualism. Audiolingualism is the teaching approach that's based on behaviorism, and audiolingualism uses imitation, practice, and reinforcement. Oh, class. Now I remember why I really want us to do face to face classes. Because here we don't have imitation, practice, and reinforcement. Okay. So when I teach behaviorism face to face, we have many activities that involve imitation, practice, and reinforcement. It's just too bad we can't do that online. Like class, repeat after me, and there's practice from one person to another. One person would say, "I'm going to the mall." The next person would say, "I'm going to the clinic." The next person would say, "I'm going to the..." Another activity that I try to teach my students is the use of "it's time I..." past tense, which we could not do online. It's time I blank. Okay, very difficult to do online. Even if I ask you to open your microphone, if we had Google Meets, still difficult to do. We'll try to do that on our next face to face. There are many students here who are doing face to face right now, including all other English majors. The third years, the fourth years, they're all here for face to face. But we'll probably have to adjust. Okay? In conclusion, class, since language is a set of habits, it follows the same rules of general habit formation.